Welcome. Just give it up. Dominic. Woo!
Can I have your mic? Can I use your microphone?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, everybody. And quiero que vos saber que yo puedo hablar en español, pero voy a hablar en inglés porque quiero que questo discurso va a ser viral. There we go. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What can I say? It is a real honor to be speaking at what I understand is the #1 Bitcoin conference in the whole of Buenos Aires this Friday afternoon. And my name is Dominic Frisby. If you don't know me, I wrote the first book on Bitcoin. How does this go forward? I wrote the first book on Bitcoin from a recognized publisher back in 2013. It was called Bitcoin, the Future of Money. And Richard Branson, the great entrepreneur Richard Branson, said, read it and glimpse into the future, although it's not clear that he did actually read it. And so, a lot of the time you will hear people say, Bitcoin is a bubble, it's tulips. But I want you to think about the fact that that tulip bubble that occurred in Holland 400 years ago, people laugh at it. But if you look at the global flower industry today, it's in Holland. And so that bubble brought 400 years of prosperity to the Dutch. And they're quite happy about it, as is this Dutch gentleman here. So I ask you, what actually is a bubble? And this is my definition of a bubble. A bubble is a bull market in which you don't have a position. Everybody says Bitcoin is a bubble. They only say it's a bubble to justify the fact that they did not invest. It is a psychological way of coping. So ignore them when they say it is a bubble. Oh, that shouldn't be there, but if people want to subscribe to my newsletter, there's the code. Now, let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. And it's very difficult to hear in here, but I ask you a question. What is the most expensive purchase you ever make in your life? Shout out an answer. Your wife. Did you buy your wife? You can't actually buy wives, Knut. Shout out, what is the most expensive thing you ever buy, most expensive purchase? A house. Most people say a house. You're all wrong. The most expensive purchase you ever make in your life is your government. And over the course of your life, your government will take roughly 50% of everything you ever earn. That is even more than Knut spends on his wife. It is even more than you spend on a house. And even under Thatcher and Reagan, the great free marketeers of the 1980s, the state still expanded. You're very lucky you have Javier Milei, who's cutting government everywhere he can. But even under Javier Milei, he's an exception, he's not the rule. It is inevitable that the state will grow, that government will grow, as long as the government can create money at no cost to itself. When one power in a society has the ability to create money at no cost to itself, it is inevitable that that body will grow. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. What is the world's fastest growing workforce? Does anyone know? Shout out. The gig economy, absolutely right, Mattia. The gig economy is the fastest growing workforce. And I typed in the fastest growing workforce into AI and it came back with this very woke picture. I don't know why it did, but anyway. At the moment, it's growing, the gig economy is growing at roughly 20% every year. It's worth 450 billion now. And it's estimated that 50% of the workforce will work will be contingent, freelance, gig economy by 2030, 50%. Now, if you think that there will be 9 billion people on the planet in 2035, of whom 6 billion are workers, that means there will be 3 billion gig economy workers within 10 years of now. 3 billion. And the traditional relationship between the employer and the employee is changing. People have multiple employers. Instead of doing one job in one place, that is changing. And this presents a huge problem to governments, because the largest source of income for governments worldwide is income tax. 50% of government revenue worldwide comes from income tax. And people who work in the gig economy pay less tax. And there is a reason for that. When you work for a company in a fixed place of income, your taxes are deducted at source. But in the gig economy, you pay taxes after the event. And so, either deliberately or accidentally, people pay much lower rates of tax. And this is going to present a huge problem to governments, because it means their greatest source of revenue is prejudiced. Tax systems were designed in a different age. They were designed around a physical economy, when one person works for one company in one place, where physical goods cross borders. The digital economy is much, much harder to tax. Where are the goods and services? Where are they offered? It's much harder to track digital goods as they cross borders, because the internet is a borderless medium. And so this presents further challenges to government. And what we're going to see as a result, what we're already seeing, is the more aggressive collection of taxes from those people that they can actually tax. And we're seeing this now in Britain. You've elected Javier Milei. We've just elected a socialist government in Britain, and they gave their first budget yesterday, and it's so aggressive in their levels of taxation. And the result is that people will leave. And so this chart shows where millionaires around the world are going. There are 20 times as many people in China as there are in Britain, but Britain has the second most millionaires leaving it in the whole world. We've got nearly as many millionaires leaving Britain as are leaving China, all because of this new government and its aggressive collection of taxes. But it is not just millionaires. Within the gig economy, the fastest growing workforce is the digital nomad. And that's what digital nomads look like, in case you weren't sure, according to AI. At the moment, digital nomads estimated at 40 million people around the world. But this workforce is growing 10 to 15% a year. They leave their country because of high house prices, for example. They can have a London wage, but have a Buenos Aires cost of living. Houses are much cheaper in Buenos Aires. We just saw a whole presentation about why people want to move to Buenos Aires. Why would you live in London and pay 10 times as much for a house when you can have a much nicer house for a tenth of the price and earn the same money? And so more and more people are leaving. And the most expensive purchase in their life, which is their government, is removed altogether. And this is a huge global trend that is taking place, and it is only going to increase. The internet is a borderless medium. The digital economy is borderless. Workers are becoming borderless. 60% of digital nomads already use crypto. What currency are digital nomads inevitably going to use? They need a borderless system of money. It's inevitable that more and more of them are going to use Bitcoin. Now, A lot of digital nomads and gig economy workers will use stable coins. There's going to be a huge growth in stable coins, but there is an intrinsic problem with stable coins. And we'll come to that in just a moment. But here is the thing. Because Bitcoin is borderless, it is a truly international system of money. National currencies are limited by the borders of that country. There is only the peso, the Argentinian peso, can only ever grow as big as Argentina grows. It can never scale in the way that Bitcoin can. Even the US dollar, which is the global reserve currency, cannot scale in a way that Bitcoin can, because it will always be bound by the US banking system. Stable coins free it up a little bit, but if you use US dollar stable coins, you are beholden to the domestic monetary policies of the United States. Bitcoin is the most scalable form of money there is. This is the problem with stable coins. We all know Donald Trump almost certainly is going to win next week. But it doesn't matter if Donald Trump wins or Kamala Harris wins. They're both going to print shed loads of money. So even though US dollar stable coins might make a good medium of exchange, they will make a terrible store of value. And so we will see gig economy workers, digital nomads, they will store their wealth in Bitcoin. It is the natural and most obvious place. And that points to huge growth in this sector. There are some 8 billion people in the world today. 7 billion of those people earn less than $40 a day. More than half of the world's population earn less than $10 a day. There are more people than ever before. There are better transport systems than ever before. Trains, planes, cars, automobiles. We can travel further, we can almost travel the whole of the world in 24 hours, almost. Never mind 72 days, 80 days, we can almost do it in 24 hours. There are more people than ever, and it is easier than ever before for them to move. What's more, 85% of the world now have one of these, a smartphone. And that smartphone has made them more aware than ever that there are better lives to be had elsewhere. Not only has it made them more aware that there are better lives than ever, it has created enormous FOMO. We all know how the internet creates FOMO. You look at people's amazing lives on Instagram or wherever it is, and you get FOMO. Bitcoin creates FOMO. The internet creates FOMO. 7 billion people around the world earning less than $40 a day all have FOMO because they want to move where they can earn more money. The mass movement of people is inevitable. I love this picture. This is a picture that will be familiar to all of you. The final moments of the World Cup final when Argentina beat France. But look at the nationalities, the genetic nationalities of those two teams. South America, Argentina, was made up of Europeans from South America. France was made up of Africans from Europe. It illustrates how the world population is totally changing. More and more people are moving, and Bitcoin is the only true international currency. The possibilities for it to scale are just enormous. As nation states, we think of the world in terms of nation states, but the nation state model is actually only 200 years old, if that. If you think of France, the United States is only 200 years old, Italy's only about 150 years old, Germany. All these nation states were designed around tax systems which are designed around the physical economies of the Industrial Revolution. But the nature of economies have changed, they've gone digital. And the tax base is changing. It's harder to tax people who live in multiple jurisdictions. The nation state, as we know it, is on its last legs, and it is inevitably going to change. And that means, as nation states die, that national currencies will die as well. It is inevitable. It is crumbling. And so you need to save money in supranational currencies. My great-grandparents were from Italy on my mother's side. And they came to the United Kingdom in the 1960s. And their job, when they worked in Italy, they were mezzadri, which means they were farm workers. But they didn't own the land on which they farmed. They would have to work, and half of everything they produced, they had to give to the owner of the land, and the other half of what they produced, they could sell. They were basically descendants of medieval serfs, okay? No one had ever owned any real estate before. Now, in the 1960s, the Italian lira was a bit like the Argentine peso. It was a terrible currency. They kept having to add zeros to it. And they came to England, and England had the pound at the time, was a relatively strong currency. So they were earning and saving in a strong currency. And all they did when they came to England is they worked as waiters. Typical Italians, they worked in a sandwich shop as waiters. But within 4 years, because they were saving in a strong currency, they were able to save up enough money that they went back to Italy, where the currency was weak, and they bought the first property in generations of that family. They were first people to ever own a property. And within another 2 years, they bought the farmland on which they had previously been workers. Now, there's a very strong moral to this story, which is all they were waiters. But because they were saving in strong currency, and they were using weak currency to buy stuff, the differential made them transform their family in a way that had never been possible for generations before. And so the ultimate message of this talk is that you should save in strong currencies. Can be gold, can be Bitcoin, but not in shitty fiat money, because that will inevitably lose its value. How much longer have I got? Ah, okay, fine. I was wondering what that was. So yes, save in strong currencies. There's the moral. Last thing, how big can crypto get? Every decade, there is an incredible bull market in something. In the 1970s, it was gold. In the 1980s, it was Japan. In the 1990s, it was tech stocks. In the noughties, it was commodities. In the tweenies, it was tech stocks again. By the end of the decade, what you tend to see happen is the total value of that sector equals the entire market cap of the S&P. It happened with all those things. Today, the market cap of the S&P is something like $40 trillion. Bitcoin's still $1.4 trillion. There are some other relative prices. But if crypto is the bull market of this decade, then that means the overall valuation of crypto and cryptocurrencies and crypto stocks and all of that could reach the S&P, the value of the S&P by the end of this decade. It's a bit like the infinity divided by 21 equation. It's a similar kind of mentality. But those figures there give you an idea of how big crypto can get. But ladies and gentlemen, I think you get the general idea of my talk. It's very pro-Bitcoin, save in strong currencies. The nation state is dying. It's going to take a long time, but hold fast. Thank you very much. Goodbye.